A new college football season in 2025 beckons, which means new opportunities for all 18 Big Ten programs. And that also means a brand new show. Welcome to the very first episode ever of Big Ten Breakdown. I am your host, Ben Stevens. Let's start off with all that we need in the laundry list to break this all down. I am first incredibly pleased and honored to be a part of the I-80 Club, working with Jack Mitchell and Josh Peterson to start this new venture here on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. To me is a joy. How about my credentials to be here hosting a Big Ten football show? Well, I do have a Big Ten hat. I'll put it on. Let's see if it still fits. Oh, like a glove. You'll notice if I look off to the side, it's actually a short bill. It's an umpire's hat. You got to go to the real suppliers to get the real goods of those conference materials. Not only just a Big Ten hat, but I bleed college football. It is my passion. It is my area, I would say, of expertise. How did I get started with my infatuation around the Big Ten Conference? That dates back to when I was working in Omaha, Nebraska, at the local CBS affiliate, KMTV 3 News Now, from August 2016 to August 2018. And quickly I learned and was indoctrinated to what the Nebraska Cornhuskers mean to the entirety of the state, from as far east as Omaha is on the border, sharing that with Iowa, to as far out west as the Colorado border as well. Nothing on a fall Saturday except the sea of red at Memorial Stadium was more important. I was involved in the A blocks in our local newscast, delivering highlights from the very start, because Nebraska football reigns supreme, really, fall Saturdays and every Saturday. But through my work there in Omaha, I started to get involved with Big Ten football in general. And I do think it is a sensational conference. In fact, it is the league of the last two reigning national champions of the college football playoff, Michigan in 2023, of course, Ohio State just a season ago. So I am incredibly pumped to be here working on a Big Ten show solely focused on Big Ten football, with some overarching storylines across the country as well in those Big Ten intersections. And I said college football is my passion, my area of expertise, where I enjoy providing the most insight from a media perspective. For the past few years, I've hosted College Football Today on Sports Grid. It's been our national pregame show, breaking everything down each and every Saturday morning for 3 hours, very much in the tune of what you see on College Game Day and, of course, Big Noon Kickoff. That is my dream. My dream job outside of Big Ten Breakdown is to host College Game Day one day. I hope to accomplish that. I hope to capitalize on this opportunity that will allow me to get there as well. So I know a lot about this great sport and have been intimately involved in covering and delivering said content around college football for the last 4 to 5 years. So I really feel as though I am up to speed with all the changes that we have seen in this landscape and in this current climate. And of course, what that means for Big Ten football starting in just over a week in 2025. Fewer than a week. Nebraska plays on Thursday. We've got teams playing on Thursday. So that leads us to the next portion, of course, of the need-to-knows for this show. What is the schedule going to look like? Big Ten Breakdown is going to be a twice-weekly show. Bi-weekly. That means a pregame show where we will preview the entirety of a Big Ten slate, whether that's conference action starting in late September and early October, or all 18 Big Ten schools with an on-conference matchup. We will do so in an authentic and a fun way to make sure you have the biggest points that you need, the key matchups that you must know for a weekend of Big Ten football. So that pregame preview show is going to drop every Friday morning. There will also be a show at the end of your weekend to make sense of what we have all seen, the biggest storylines, the biggest moments from a weekend that was. That will drop Monday morning. Think of it as our recap post-game show. Again, I said that I wanted to host College Game Day. That is my dream job. That's pregame. We'll also have the post-game as well. We'll also do some fun things in the greatness that is Big Ten football. Maybe something along the lines of the best punt of the week in the Big Ten Conference, the stupidest or dumbest thing that we saw on a weekly basis. We'll have a lot of fun with everything that we do here on Big Ten Breakdown. That is my promise. That is my guarantee to you. You'll learn everything. You'll become a smarter, more engaged fan. And I hope you have the most fun football season all around the Big Ten Conference that you have ever had here in 2025. So once again, incredibly pleased to be hosting Big Ten Breakdown, to have this be the first rendition of the show. Incredibly pleased to be working with the great folks at the I-80 Club. And you can get the podcast, you can get this video version on YouTube for absolutely free. But I will say, if you want to get them without any advertisements to disrupt the flow of what we have here, then of course, make sure you go to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/I-80 Club. You go there, you get everything that the I-80 Club produces. That's the content of Josh and Jack, everything they've been doing around Nebraska football and Nebraska ball throughout the past few seasons. That's Volleyball State, the premier volleyball show, I believe, here on the digital internet, if I do say so myself. And of course, what we are starting here on this maiden voyage, on this venture on Big Ten Breakdown. So it's not just about the start of all of this and the formalities and the laundry list that we need to go through here. It's also about getting you ready for the 2025 college football season. Each and every episode, we're going to try to keep around 30 to 45 minutes. I promise I will not try to be long-winded. As we get deeper and deeper into the season, we'll have some of the best guests from around the industry that I have worked with in this college football and collegiate athletic space here to break things down, either specifically for a college or two that they cover, a team they are closely following and intimately in the know of, or just some of the best around college football to break down the Big Ten as well. But for the remainder of our time here today, I hope about 30 minutes or so, we are going to focus on getting you ready with a 2025 Big Ten season preview. And we can go through all 18 schools. Yes, the Big Ten Conference is an 18-school league now for a second consecutive year. And we can run through the roster. We can talk about the transfer portal, who has been added, who has departed, what that depth chart looks like, the starting 11 offensively and defensively, changes to the coaching staff. And I promise we will hit on all of that. But we're going to do so in a creative way. We are going to go through all 18 Big Ten programs, getting you ready for 2025 with what you need to know first and foremost. And we will do so in a one-word or a one-phrase preview, something that defines this program and their outlook for the 2025 college football campaign, and then break down why that is the case, how I feel about this team, what you can expect and anticipate out of this club throughout 2025. We're going to do so in order based on our 2024 conference standings. Listen, it's about 8 minutes into the show. We already have to have a sip of water. We're going to do that, though. We're going to keep the flow going. All right. Now we're locked in and we're ready to go. So as we begin our 2025 Big Ten football preview, one word, one phrase that defines this team entering 2025. Again, we go in order of the 2024 standings. So we start at the top with the undefeated Big Ten champions in their very first year in the conference, the Oregon Ducks, who were 13-0 last year, a perfect 9-0 in Big Ten play, and of course a victory in Indianapolis that opening weekend of December against Penn State. So what is that one word or one phrase to define the Ducks entering 2025? Simply for me, it's encore. What do Dan Lanning and company have this year in Eugene, inside Autzen Stadium, to back up an unblemished first season in the Big Ten? Again, of course, they were the number one seed in the first ever 12-team college football playoff based on that bracket, based on the seeding model that we had last year that will be very different in 2025. Of course, a 12-team straight seeding model now. Oregon had the unfortunate nature of taking on the eventual national champion in Ohio State, we will get to in just a moment. But the encore for me this year for Oregon is a little bit different. It's year number 4 under Dan Lanning. And as opposed to the previous 3 years under Lanning, it's a little bit of a different formula in terms of what the quarterback room is going to look like. First 2 years, 2022, 2023, it was the veteran in Bo Nix trying to reinvent his career after the Plains of Auburn in Eugene. And of course, last year in 2024, that was Dylan Gabriel. You have one of the best offensive coordinators in college football and in the Big Ten in Will Stein. He has a challenge this year with Dante Moore, a man that maybe you know, a name that you probably remember from the 2023 season when he made 5 starts as a true freshman, and now conference foe in the Big Ten with UCLA. That was under Chip Kelly. And there were some high highs for Dante Moore as a true freshman in Westwood. There There was also some low lows, 8 touchdowns to 6 interceptions in those 5 starts that he made for the Bruins back in 2023. So it's very different than the veteran experience they had with Bo Nix and Dillon Gabriel, and now a guy that only has 5 starts in Dante Moore. Both Bo Nix and Dillon Gabriel ended up by the end of their careers at Oregon starting more than 60 games at the FBS level. Very different story this year. Oregon has to remake a little bit of that offensive line. They have done through the transfer portal. Isaiah World, a mammoth of a man, 6'8", 320, the transfer from Nevada, probably taking over that blindside blocker left tackle spot. Emmanuel Pregnon, who last year was with USC, now will be in Eugene. Alex Harkey, a transfer from Texas State on the other side. And what we know about Dan Lanning, he's one of the brightest defensive minds in the sport. He's the head coach, of course, and the OC, Will Stein, calls things over there. Dan Lanning's cred, though, came from being the defensive coordinator at Georgia under Kirby Smart. Each of the previous 2 seasons, a top 20 scoring defense in all of college football. You've got some very strong returning talent. Mateo Uiagalelei, one of the best edge rushers in the country, and Bryce Bechter, who was a 14th round draft pick, I think, for the Houston Astros. Really good baseball player for Oregon. He's one of the leaders of that defense in that linebacking core. A couple of newcomers to know for the Ducks this year. Mekhi Hughes, a transfer from Tulane, 1,400 yards, 15 rushing scores last season. Will provide that after losing Jordan James. Noah Whittington still there in the backfield for Oregon as well. And how about the interconference transfer of a guy that I love, in Dylan Thieneman, who, of course, in 2 years in West Lafayette for Purdue, was the 2023 Big Ten Freshman of the Year, and last year as a DB, led the Big Ten in tackles at the defensive back position with 104. Oregon is going to be stacked. There are 3 teams in the Big Ten Conference this year that have a preseason projected win total at 10.5. That's Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State. There's only 4 teams at the FBS level across the nation that have a win total of the preseason of 10.5, adding in Notre Dame. 3 of them hail from the Big Ten. Oregon is certainly that. So again, that buzzword, that one phrase that encapsulates the Ducks entering 2025, in my estimation, in this season preview, that would be encore. We'll see what the encore is in Eugene. Next up, we go to Penn State. Penn State, of course, coming up short against Oregon in that Big Ten title game. The Nittany Lions coming up short in the college football playoff semifinal against Notre Dame. First CFP berth for the Nittany Lions under James Franklin. And so when you look at Penn State this year, entering number 2 in the preseason poll, only 5 points of separation from the top team in the nation, that being Texas. It is our smallest distinction in terms of points between AP1 and AP2 in the preseason poll since 1998. How do we define this year? What one word, one phrase do we use for the Nittany Lions in State College? That's going to be expectation, because that is the story for Penn State this year. We understand what has plagued Penn State in years past. It has been well documented. Now entering year number 12 under James Franklin. His inability to win the big one, right? To beat an AP top 10, AP top 5 foe, to win a Big Ten conference championship. They got there last year. Of course, they won it earlier in the 2010s as well. I believe 2016, if I am not mistaken. But the identity of this Penn State team finally getting past the likes of Ohio State, getting past Oregon. We're in the college football playoff semifinal against the Fighting Irish. That is still where things are a little bit difficult for Penn State. James Franklin's record against AP top 10 foes during his 11 seasons as the head coach for the Nittany Lions is 4-20 after the loss to Notre Dame in the college football playoff semifinal, a top 5 AP team at the time. The record for James Franklin at Penn State against AP top 5 foes is 1-15. It is not good by any means, but expectation comes in because of all the returning talent this year in State College and what the overall national expectation is for the Nittany Lions. 4th best price to win a national championship, according to the odds makers, as we get ready for 2025. And when you talk about returning production, there is no better point to place than at State College this year. We have seen that be a recipe for success for our most recent 2 national champs, both hailing from the Big Ten, Michigan in 2023, Ohio State in 2024. Drew Aller is back. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, the dual-headed monster in the backfield. They are both back. Along the offensive line, you got one of the best interior O-linemen in the country, and Olive Avenga Olive Avenga Ioane. Make sure you know the name. He's going to be a high pick in the 2025 NFL, or 2026 NFL draft, rather. Drew Shelton along the left side of that offensive line, kind of that blind side blocker as well for this team. They are very, very stout. And I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, you make the upgrade from Tom Allen, who's now the defensive coordinator at Clemson, to Jim Knowles, who was the defensive coordinator last year for Ohio State when they were the best scoring defense in the country, and, of course, winning a national championship. You have so much returning talent on that side of the ball. Denied Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant up front along that defensive line, Dom DeLuca, Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell, the transfer from North Carolina, and in the backfield, Zakee Wheatley anchors things as well for this side. Really stout team in Penn State, and that is the expectation. But the issue, once again, is we have seen this before. Can James Franklin get over that ledge that is necessary, not just to get to the college football playoff, not to win a couple games even in the CFP, as we saw for Penn State a year ago? It's can they get to the semifinal once again, which I think is the standard of expectation this year. And I think anything short of that would be a disappointment. Heck, I think anything short of a national championship game appearance for the Penn State Nittany Lions might be considered a disappointment in 2025 in Happy Valley. That is the bar. That is the expectation. That is the one key word for Penn State entering 2025. 2 of 18 down, 16 more to go. We go in order of the conference standings. Probably not the team that anybody expected to finish third in those Big Ten standings a year ago, but that was the story for the Indiana Hoosiers, who we preview next. So what is that one word, that one phrase? Flash in the pan, question mark, for an IU team that ranks 20th in the preseason AP Top 25, that in 2024, in the first year in Bloomington for Curt Cignetti, well documented, 11 wins a season ago. It was the first time in 126 years of Indiana football that IU won double-digit games in a single season. That's 10 plus, and they got to 11. And so now, was that just an anomaly? Was that a one-year instance? Or can Curt Cignetti, who is an absolute winner wherever he has been, but certainly in his 3 years at the FBS level with James Madison and now with IU, 30-6 straight up. That's a win percentage of .833. That is the fifth highest winning percentage among active FBS head coaches, both at JMU and now, of course, at the Power Conference level for Indiana. Is it sustainable? In my estimation, I believe it is. Indiana's win total is 8.5. If the Hoosiers go over that for a second consecutive year, it would be the first time in program history, now making 127 seasons, that IU has had back-to-back 9+ win campaigns. They have never done that. Only once have the Hoosiers won 8 games consecutively in 2 straight seasons, and that was a long time ago in 1987 and 1988. There has been so much conjecture this offseason, which I think only proves that Indiana has made it at the top of the national landscape about IU's schedule, about Curt Cignetti's scheduling philosophy. We'll talk about that another day. I try to give Indiana a little bit more credence. Is their non-conference schedule weak? Absolutely. Has Sig made any bones about that? No. He's not trying to defraud anybody by it. Indiana plays 9 Power 4 opponents this year. 23 other teams in the Power Conference leagues also play 9 Power Conference opponents this year. 5 other teams in the Big Ten. That means 12 play 10 plus. But just to say, Indiana's schedule not nearly as bad as people might give it credit for, but that also is a recipe for success. It is how the Hoosiers game the system, if you will, and that is why Curt Cignetti makes no bones about it. He is telling you exactly what he is trying to do and was able to accomplish that feat in his first year in Bloomington. So because of that scheduled conjecture, and I just kind of got lost in a tangent myself, you almost forget about the roster for IU and what Indiana brings back in 2025. Mike Shanahan remains as that offensive coordinator. Tino Sunseri elsewhere in the Big Ten at UCLA. We'll talk to Bruins a little bit later on in this show. But when you look at Indiana, they returned 4 all-conference performers from a year ago. On the offensive side of the ball, that's wide receiver Elijah Surratt, who was sensational last year, making the transition from JMU to IU. Defensively, Mikhail Kamara might be one of the best D linemen in this conference. Aiden Fisher, one of the most experienced linebackers for Indiana as well. And D'Angelo Pons. You have a Hoosiers team that is absolutely stacked. And then you have the transfers of what Curt Cignetti was known for in 2025 in the quarterback position with Fernando Mendoza, who is the career all-time leader at Cal, in terms of completion percentage, 66.4%. You add in the likes of Roman Hemby from Maryland, Pat Coogan along the interior of that O-line from Notre Dame. This is a really talented Indiana football team that we kind of get distracted by the schedule and the idea that we're not expecting Indiana to win 10 games in 2 consecutive years. But I think the Hoosiers will have an opportunity to do so. If I'm messing with my earpiece too much, let me know in the comments. But I think the Hoosiers are going to have a great opportunity to be around 9 wins. Am I predicting Indiana to reach the college football playoff for a second straight year? Probably not. Do I think the Hoosiers are going to be bad, fall back to the likes of 4-8, 5-7? No. Indiana, to me, is an 8 or a 9-win football team because of the talent right now for the Hoosiers. So that one phrase that we defined Indiana's 2025 campaign by, flash in the pan, question mark. I'll get rid of that question mark, and I'll cross out flash in the pan. I think Indiana has a really stout year in 2025, which leads us to our 4th Big Ten team, the Ohio State Buckeyes. The reigning national champs, as the 4th team that we discuss on a Big Ten football preview for 2025 based on the conference standings of a season ago. How does that even work? That's the era we are in now in college football. You don't have to win a conference championship to have a shot at the table for the college football playoff and stay in the chase for that national championship, as Ohio State displayed in the very first year of the 12-team era of the CFP, ultimately going through one of the most grueling stretches of postseason play, the longest season we have ever seen, the most teams having the most opportunities to contend for a national championship. And when the end of the road came, Ohio State was able to conquer it all, to get to the mountaintop. So that is the one word, the one phrase to define the Buckeyes for 2025, the mountaintop. Will Ohio State be back to the pinnacle, or will that hike back to the top be a little bit too steep in 2025? Number 3 in the AP poll for these Ohio State Buckeyes. They had 14 wins last season. They had 5 wins against AP top 5 foes. That is the most we have ever seen in the history of FBS college football. Again, which points to the landscape of which Ohio State was able to win a national championship. But when you're the best team in college football, or at least the team that ends with that national championship trophy, probably means you had a pretty talented roster, right? 14 guys for Ohio State drafted in the 2025 NFL draft, 4 in the first round. That's natural, though. And we know Ohio State is not lacking talent, regardless of how many guys go to the NFL draft in whatever year span that looks like. The biggest question, though, of course, is that quarterback spot. Julian Sayin, the number 1 quarterback in the 2025 recruiting class, originally went to Alabama, transferred last year to Ohio State, was there in terms of learning from Will Howard, learning that offensive scheme under Chip Kelly. He only had 12 passes, though, did not start a game for Ohio State. He will be making his first start at home in the shoe against the number 1 team in the country in Texas in just over a week. That is the weight of expectation when you win a national championship. But if you're at Ohio State, you're going to have a ton of talent around you, and that's what we expect with maybe the best offensive player in college football in Jeremiah Smith, and a really good offensive line that did not lose as much talent as you might expect for a team that won a national championship a year ago. That's really important for me for the Buckeyes. If they have the best offensive player in college football and in the Big Ten in Jeremiah Smith, they also might have the best defensive player in college football in Caleb Downs. So my concern is not even really the quarterback in Julian Sayin. He'll have his opportunity to prove it. My concern is not the skill set or the offensive line at his disposal that will be looking to protect him, or really the playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. You add in a guy like Sonny Styles, one of the best in the country at the linebacker spot. He's become fearsome there. My concern for Ohio State about reaching that pinnacle of the sport once again is actually the change in the coordinators. Brian Hartline is going to take over, officially calling the plays offensively for the first time during his tenure at Ohio State. And mainly it's defensively. Kind of a weird and murky breakup with Jim Knowles, who made his way to Penn State, of course, this offseason. So who comes in as the defensive coordinator in Columbus? That's Matt Patricia, a guy that does not have a ton of collegiate football experience. In fact, the last time he was working at the FBS or power conference level, it was back during his days as a Syracuse grad assistant in the early 2000s. Ohio State had the best scoring defense in the country. It was virtually impossible to score against the Buckeyes inside the red zone last year. They had the second best scoring defense in the nation the year prior under Jim Knowles, who had been there now for 3 years before his departure this offseason. That's my biggest concern for Ohio State. Are the coordinators up to snuff as we saw last year? Can Brian Hartline replicate the success we saw for Chip Kelly and Ryan Day calling plays previously? And is Matt Patricia really in his first big-time role in college football, despite the NFL experience, going to be that key that they need this year for Ohio State? Of course, some newcomers there as well. Max Clare, who was a tight end last year at Purdue, second most receiving yards for a tight end in the Big Ten Conference a season ago, only behind Tyler Warren, who was a top 15 pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Ethan Onionwu, the offensive lineman transferred from Rice, more than likely going to take over at that starting left tackle position. And Bo Atkinson, an edge rusher from UNC that had 7.5 sacks a season ago. The talent is there for Ohio State. My question about the mountaintop being the phrase for the Buckeyes in 2025, once again, is more in the coaching staff under the purview of Ryan Day. Now let's keep it rolling here to the fifth team in our 2025 season previews. That would be the Illinois Fighting Illini. What is that key word for Brett Bielema and the Illini this year? Optimism. And that's indicated right away. And you see it in terms of what their AP preseason poll is. Number 12 in the preseason AP top 25 for the Illini. It says it all. It is the highest preseason ranking for Illinois football since 1990. It is the highest that Illinois has been ranked in any AP poll, preseason, postseason, or during the middle of the year since November of 2021. Now, I have been incredibly high on the Illini since they upset South Carolina for their fourth-ranked win of 2024 in that Citrus Bowl. At the time, back in early January, I was saying if you see a way too early preseason ranking for the 2025 college football season and Illinois is not ranked in the top 15, it's incorrect. Obviously, the AP poll goes to back that up. The Illini under Burt, that being Brett Bielema, winning 10 games in 2024 for the first time since 2001. As I mentioned, with that upset win over South Carolina in the Citrus Bowl, 4 ranked wins for the Illini last season. In the 16 years prior, from 2008 until 2023, they had 3 total ranked victories against AP top 25 foes. More in one year in 2024, 4 ranked wins than in the previous 16 years. Only 3. And why am I so high about Illinois? Why did I know this back in January? Because of all the talent that returns to Champaign. 75% returning production for the Illini this year. That's the 4th most in the FBS ranks. That is also the most within the Big Ten Conference. You've got some all-conference performers back. J.C. Davis, one of the best O-linemen. Xavier Scott, who can take the football away better than most in this conference. And Gabe Akis, one of the best edge rushers in the country. So much returning talent up front offensively. And of course, when you're talking congruency year over year, you need to mention the quarterback, and that's Luke Altmaier. He is the active FBS career leader with 5 game-winning drives in the final minute of regulation or overtime. I'm sure you have seen the quarterback rankings for the Big Ten throughout this offseason. Many probably having Drew Aller as that number 1 quarterback in the conference. To me, it's Luke Altmaier because of that clutch gene, because of what he does in the most significant stages. And when I look at things from a strength of schedule perspective, there is no great metric. As we know, there are many that define strength of schedule around college football. I don't love ESPN FPI for pretty obvious reasons in terms of some of the biases in the weight that it gives to certain programs. Sagarin is great. Pick Six Preview is great. Phil Still is great. The way that I look at it, though, is based on projected win totals. And of those win totals, of not just your conference foes, but all of your FBS opponents, Illinois has the second easiest Big Ten slate. I mentioned it earlier. 3 teams in the conference that have a win total of 10.5 or higher. 4 if you add Michigan with a preseason win total of 9.5 or better. Illinois only plays 1. That's Ohio State. There are 3 teams in the Big Ten with a preseason win total of 4.5 or lower. Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue. Illinois plays all 3. These are preseason expectations, but it gives you an idea of what these teams are thought of doing and how many wins they are going to stack up in the upcoming college football season. Because of that strength of schedule, I think Illinois gets the 10 wins for a second consecutive year. And if Illinois can get the 10 wins in the regular season, not only are the Illini contending for a Big Ten championship spot, but in my opinion, what I think for Illinois this year is maybe a run to the college football playoff. That has become a trendy saying around Champaign. Who can be this year's Indiana? Many looking at the Illinois Fighting Illini. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or anything here, but I was on that belief earlier in the offseason. Optimism is the word for the number 12 team in the preseason AP poll, that being the Illinois Fighting Illini. And it's optimism I do believe they will be able to realize this year in 2025. Let's keep it rolling through the Big Ten. Next up, the Iowa Hawkeyes. What is the term that defines 2025? It's basically the term that has defined Iowa football since 1999. It's year 27 for Kirk Ferentz, and that one word for the Hawkeyes entering 2025, consistency. 8 wins, once again, for Iowa a season ago. They have won 8+ games for the last 9 full college football seasons. One of 5 FBS programs that can say that. Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama. Those are the other 4 teams along with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Is it always the prettiest? Perhaps not. Does it get the job done at the end of the day in terms of the win column and having at least one more point than your foe? Yes, it certainly does. Not only consistency in the wins, consistency in the defensive performances. I trust Phil Parker, the DC in Iowa City, more than I do many of my family members. He has held opponents, his defensive units has held opponents to fewer than 20 points for 9 consecutive years, 8 full seasons excluding 2020. Nobody else in college football has held their foes to fewer than 20 points in more than 5 straight years. Iowa has done it 9 consecutive seasons. So we know that's going to be good. But here's the difference now. Is an Iowa offense that looks pretty darn good. Last year, averaging 27.7 points per game, 72nd in the country. All right. There was 134 FBS teams last year. 72nd is even around the bottom half if I do the quick math correctly. But it was the first time since 2018, now with new offensive coordinator Tim Lester, that Iowa ranked in the top 75 nationally in terms of scoring offensive output. It was the first time since 2016 that Iowa scored 40-plus games in at least 4 games in a season, which they did in 2024. And it was the first time since the year 1960, I promise Kirk Ferentz was not the head coach at the time, that Iowa led the Big Ten Conference in rushing yards, more than 197 yards on the ground. It's impossible, or at least incredibly difficult, to replace the production of a Caleb Johnson, who, of course, was drafted early on by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2025 NFL Draft. But I really do trust the 2 guys that are there and looking to fill that void. Kamari Moulton, who last year for Iowa had close to 500 yards, kind of being that second breath of fresh air behind Caleb Johnson, and Jazzy and Patterson as well. They're going to form a really stout offense, and that's how Tim Lester has done things. And if you're establishing the run, which is opening up the play-action pass, we'll talk about the quarterback in just a moment, you need a good O-line. Iowa should have that once again. Logan Jones, one of the best centers in the country in college football. And if you don't know the name Jennings Dunker, and you don't know what he looks like, the flaming red-headed mullet, a beautiful mustache, not only does the attire and the appeal of Jennings Dunker certainly say offensive lineman, he's one of the best offensive tackles in this conference and in the country. So let's get to the quarterback spot. Mark Gronowski now takes over, the transfer from South Dakota State, who was the 2023 FCS National Player of the Year. He won 2 national championships with the Jackrabbits. Is he going to be incredible? That remains to be seen. But I do feel comfortable in saying right here and right now that Mark Gronowski is going to be an improvement at the quarterback spot for Iowa, better than they have had at least the last 5 seasons. And if you have that with an offense that is continuing to produce under Tim Lester, I think this Iowa team wins 8 games for a 10th consecutive year. Now, can the Hawkeyes get to 9 or 10 and maybe challenge for a college football playoff spot? Maybe a different story, but consistency defines Iowa. Year number 27 under Kirk Ferentz, 1 win away, and they should get it in the season opener from matching Woody Hayes for the most wins ever by a Big Ten head coach, that being 205. That's what Iowa brings to the 2025 college football season. Consistency, I might even say improvement at the quarterback spot with Mark Gronkowski and what that looks like for Iowa this upcoming season. Quick water break. And let me put on the AC here in my home studio apartment. By the way, the venue here, moving out of my home studio from one portion of Big Ten country, about an hour away from Piscataway, New Jersey, the home of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights and the first home of college football, to another portion in the heart of Big Ten country, to the beaches of Southern California. I'll do that next week. We'll have Big Ten breakdown, getting you ready for that week 1 slate before I depart. So the home studio is going to look a little bit different here in the next few weeks here on Big Ten Breakdown. All right, next up, as we continue and get back to our 2025 season preview, one word, one phrase that defines each of the 18 Big Ten programs entering this new season. We go to the Michigan Wolverines. And the phrase that I have chosen for the Maize and Blue is back to football. Number 14 in the preseason AP poll, of course, the ruling last week of the discipline handed out to Michigan. Not overly severe by any means. A pretty substantial financial penalty, but not a vacating of wins. Certainly not a loss of a national championship by any means, or a postseason ban on the horizon. So with that discipline and penalty, however you feel about it, severe, not severe enough, not what you predicted, Michigan can get back to football in 2025. The scandal is now behind them. How you judge the 2023 national championship, I will leave up to you. What I will say, though, is find you loyalty in life like Connor Stallions to Michigan football. And when we talk about getting back to football, let's break down the X's and O's, and let's start with the slate for the Wolverines this year. They have the easiest schedule, and it's not particularly close within the Big Ten Conference. Again, I talked about those projected win totals of all FBS opponents. Michigan has by far the easiest in this conference. They play all 3 Big Ten teams with the win totals of 4.5 or fewer, Maryland, Purdue, and Northwestern. The only team that has a win total above 7.5, Sharon Moore and his Wolverines play this year, is Ohio State. That's in the game. They avoid Penn State, Oregon, Indiana, Illinois. Those are the 4 teams outside of Michigan that have a win total of 8.5 or higher, of course, not including Ohio State in that metric. Not even Iowa on the schedule for the Maize and Blue. The defense I still expect to be good now in year number 2 under Wink Martindale. It was last year. Michigan has allowed fewer than 20 points per game in each of the last 4 seasons. The offensive line is a little bit young. Gio El-Hadi will kind of lead ways there for this offensive line. Some experience, though, and that is Sharon Moore's calling card in terms of where he kind of cut his teeth as an offensive line coach. Now let's talk about Sharon Moore. He is expected to be suspended for 2 games, weeks 3, week 4. That's kind of what we're talking about right now, the Central Michigan game. How ironic. And the Nebraska game in the Big Ten opener. That has not been confirmed officially by the Michigan athletic department or that football program. But one of the concerns for Michigan this year, as they get back to football, 29 guys in the last 3 NFL drafts have been selected. 3 guys in the 2025 draft going in the first 13 picks. Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, and Kenneth Grant. But the overall big question for Michigan to get to those high heights is the quarterback in Bryce Underwood, the number 1 quarterback in the country in the 2025 class, the 2nd highest recruit ever in the long and illustrious history of Michigan football, the highest ranked quarterback recruit in the history of this program. He is the key new name to know. They also brought in Mikey Keene with some experience, of course, from Fresno State, if anything were to go awry this year at the quarterback spot. But Bryce Underwood will be the difference. You pay a guy $12 million, you expect to see those results right away. And based on the schedule, if Michigan is not at bare minimum an 8-4 football team in 2025, some serious questions and perhaps concerns about Sharon Moore. I'm not saying the seat would get overly warm or even hot, but Michigan's win total is 9.5. The Wolverines should get to 9 wins just based on the slate. Yes, a marquee non-conference game against Oklahoma on the road in Norman, an OU team that should be very good despite a difficult schedule in the SEC. But the Big Ten slate for the Maize and Blue outside of that game and the game against Ohio State is as favorable as you can like it now in this expanded and realigned Big Ten Conference. Michigan needs to get to 9 wins this year, and back to football is that priority. Next up, we go to the Minnesota Golden Gophers. What is that one word, that one phrase that will define 2025 for the Gophers? Let me borrow from PJ Fleck. He says, row the boat. I'll say, keep on rowing. In much the same way that we discussed Iowa, consistency. You can make a similar argument now for Minnesota. It might sound crazy to say. PJ Fleck about to enter year number 9 at the helm there in the Twin Cities. They have won at least 8 games in 3 of the last 4 years. They have reached a bowl game in the last 6 full seasons as well. It's a team under PJ Fleck that has been incredibly consistent and successful. They just stack up wins. And maybe you don't think of it as much, But that is what Minnesota is able to pull off. A top 10 scoring defense in 2 of the last 3 years. Corey Heatherman leaves. He goes to Miami. Danny Collins, who was the safeties coach for a long time under PJ Fleck, takes over the DC responsibilities. But I expect the defense to be A-OK, as it often has been in Minneapolis. So the main question for the Golden Gophers, that quarterback spot. Drake Lindsay takes over. The redshirt freshman, only 5 pass attempts last year. He's got everything you like, prototypically at least, in the stature and how he looks out there, and has received some very high praise this year in fall camp, but only 5 pass attempts during his first year there for Minnesota, backing up Max Brosmer, who was great a season ago. But if you want to break in a new quarterback and you're doing things in the Big Ten Conference, you are running the damn ball, and Minnesota should do that incredibly, incredibly well in 2025. Darius Taylor remains. A 2024 season that maybe was not as explosive as his first campaign in 2023, when he only played 6 games as a true freshman and averaged better than 133 rushing yards per game. But last year still found his way to more than 1,300 all-purpose yards. Also getting it done as a receiver out of the backfield. They also bring in a transfer running back in A.J. Turner from Marshall, more than 860 yards last year for the Thundering Herd. And there could be a new piece offensively for the Gophers in Coy Parrish, who was so great last year for Minnesota, the true freshman, the native of Esco, staying home and being there for this Minnesota side. 5 interceptions as a true freshman that led all the Big Ten Conference. He also was a vital and exciting playmaker in the return space, both kick returns and punt returns for the Golden Gophers a year ago. In fact, Coy Parrish is the only freshman since return stats started to become official in the FBS college football in 1976 to have 5 interceptions, more than 100 kick and punt return yards in the same season. And Coy Parrish should be doing things on the offensive side of the ball. So keep on rowing is that main phrase for Minnesota in 2025. And I'm not going to be surprised if at the end of the year, the Gophers are a 7, 8, or 9 win football team once again. Let's keep it rolling. We now get to the USC Trojans. The one word that I have defined Southern Cal season by in 2025 is Hollywood. When you think of Tinseltown, when you think of Los Angeles, you think of USC football. Before the days of the Rams and the Chargers being there, trust me, I grew up in Los Angeles from 1994 until 2012. In the heyday, in the peak of all that USC football was under Pete Carroll, they were so darn cool, man. They were Hollywood. They have lost some of that shine. They have lost some of that celebrity status. They have lost some of that luster in the last few years, and certainly in 2024 in the debut season in the Big Ten Conference. Lincoln Riley needs to get USC back to that. 17-3 in his first 20 games at the helm in 2022 and 2023, and then to end out the 2023 campaign. And last year in 2024, in the last 20 games for Riley as USC's head coach, just 9-11. Again, 17-3 in his first 20 games at the helm of SC, 9-11 in his last 20, but did end the year well a season ago. They had lost 4 of their first 5 Big Ten games ever. They won 3 of their final 4. They beat Texas A&M in that Las Vegas Bowl for a marquee win to end it. For me, I'm trusting in Lincoln Riley always as an offensive mind. And I think last year the move that he made to bring in D'Anton Lynn from the crosstown rivals at UCLA was incredibly stout. Now, was USC a top 5 defense in the Big Ten? Not particularly close, still allowing better than 24 points per game last year. But that is so vastly improved from where the Trojans were in the first 2 seasons under Lincoln Riley. And with defensive coordinator Alex Grinch, they allowed 34.4 points per game in 2023, more than 29 points per game in 2022. So to get that down to 24 points per game with the talent defensively under D'Anton Lynn, you expect even better year over year in 2025. And offensively, things were slightly off last year, per se. Miller Moss gets the start for USC. Jaden Mayava, the UNLV transfer, takes over as the starter for the final 4 games of the year. 11 touchdowns, the 6 interceptions, 3 of those 4 games, Jaden Mayava throwing for at least 3 passing scores. The offense is going to be fine. When you look at some of the stats and the figures for SC a season ago, more than 437 yards of total offense in the 2024 campaign, second best in the Big Ten, but only 30 points per game. Still top 5 in the Big Ten for a conference that is not overly known for its scoring explosiveness. But when you compare that to what Lincoln Riley has done as a head coach, it is nowhere close to the mark that we expect. In his first 6 full years prior to 2024 as a head coach, first at Oklahoma and then his first 2 seasons at USC, Lincoln Riley's offense is always ranked top 10 in terms of those scoring offense marks around the nation, averaging at least 39 points per game. We're talking nearly 2 scores of difference from what that standard is for Lincoln Riley offenses to what we saw in 2024. If that gets back with a full season under Jaden Mayava, I know that Hassan Longstreet is there as well. They're a very talented freshman, but Jaden Mayava should be that guy, and Lincoln Riley's offense continues to do what we can expect it to. USC is a very intriguing team. Hollywood is that one word that will define 2025. Can Lincoln Riley make USC that celebrity status out in Los Angeles in year number 2 of their time in the Big Ten Conference? From one coast, like me, to the other coast, where I am currently, New York's Big Ten team, your family, your religion, and Rutgers football. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights entering 2025. What is that term? Familiarity. Greg Schiano in his second tenure now at the helm in Piscataway. Erect the statue, build it already, even while he is a living legend and even while he is still the head coach of this Rutgers football program. Rutgers has made a bowl game each of the previous 2 years. They won 4 Big Ten games a season ago, the most that Rutgers had ever done in their decade as a Big Ten conference member. Rutgers trying to make a bowl game for a 3rd consecutive season for the first time since 2012 to 2014 when Kyle Flood was there taking over for Greg Schiano. 9 of the 13 bowl games that the Scarlet Knights have played in school history, only 13. 9 of the 13 in school history, Greg Schiano has been the head coach. This guy is Rutgers football. But last year, one of the reasons that Rutgers was able to win 4 conference games was because of realignment out of the vaunted Big Ten East and did not have to play those teams they were accustomed to. The schedule was much easier last season than it is right now. Rutgers is the only team in the Big Ten that gets all 3 of those teams this year that I mentioned that have a win total of 10.5. Rutgers is the only team in the Big Ten Conference that plays all 3 of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. Good luck to Rutgers. At least 2 of those 3 are at home. But what Rutgers has done a great job of under Greg Schiano is the transfer portal. 9th best transfer portal class in FBS college football in the offseason, according to On3. 2nd best in the Big Ten Conference. A couple of names on the offensive side. The wide receiver DT Sheffield from North Texas. CJ Campbell, one of the running backs from FAU, making his way over. Going to be tough to replace Kyle Monungai, but somebody will do it. 7 of the 11 starters, though, however, on the defensive side of the ball, projected to be through the transfer portal. Even if it's not fully 7, at least more than half projected to start from the transfer portal. One name that has not, DJ DeBome, who is incredibly good as a linebacker for this Rutgers side, one of the staples of consistency for this Rutgers defense. Again, that term is familiarity. Familiarity for Rutgers to play a very difficult Big Ten Conference schedule once again, but familiarity for Rutgers to try to get back to a bowl game, which they have done now 2 seasons in a row for a 3rd consecutive year for the first time since 2012 through 2014. The next team up, we go back across country to the Northwest. That would be the Washington Huskies. What is the term to define the Huskies in 2025? To me, it's ceiling. And it's not quite optimism or positivity or expectation. It's ceiling, because I question what that ceiling is for UW, a trendy team throughout most of this offseason that many believe the Huskies can be an 8, maybe 9-win football team based on what we saw for DeMond Williams last year under Jed Fish. Washington won 4 of its first 6 games a season ago. They were booked as a favorite in every one of those, but then they lost 5 of their last 7. They were booked as an underdog in 5 of those 7 games, just 1-4 straight up and against the number as an underdog to end out the year in 2024. So if Washington is now expected to do a little bit more and that ceiling is higher in Seattle, a lot of the focus will be on DeMond Williams, who started the final 2 games for UW a year ago on the road at Oregon. A huge Sun Bowl performance against Louisville. 17 of 20 against Oregon on the road in Autzen for your first career start. That's crazy. 17 of 20, 201 yards and a touchdown. In the Sun Bowl against the Cards, 26 of 32, 374 yards. 4 touchdowns, albeit an interception, and 48 more rushing yards and a rushing score as well. 5 total touchdowns out of DeMond Williams. He was also sacked 15 times in just those 2 starts. So a couple of transfers for Washington will be vital along that O-line. Garen Hatchett joining his brother along that O-line, the transfer from Oklahoma, and Carver Willis, a transfer from K-State, projected to be that blindside blocker. So you've got Damon Williams, should feel very good about that. Denzel Boston is back, leading that wide receiver core. And Jonah Coleman, one of 9 guys last year in the Big Ten to post more than 1,000 rushing yards in 2024, back as well. And it's a very interesting defensive coordinator hire for Jedd Fisch now in his second year at UW. Last year it was Steve Belichick. Now it's Ryan Walters. We can make our jokes about Walters as a head coach in this conference and what he did in West Lafayette the previous 2 seasons. Of course, that was dismal. But as a defensive coordinator, I think one of the best that you'll find in this sport. In his last year as a DC in Champaign with Illinois in 2022, they were the best scoring defense in all of the country. And you add in a guy into Dacario Davis that comes over as well. Dacario Davis, for that cornerback spot for Washington. Spent the last 3 years at Arizona. The first 2, of course, playing under Jedd Fisch. Now will join his old skipper once again in Seattle. He was a second-team All-Big 12 selection despite a disappointing season for the Cats last year. Ceiling is the term for Washington because I'm a little bit skeptical just how high that ceiling is in Seattle, but some think it could be as high as 9 wins. A lot of that will rely on Damon Williams under the bright offensive mind that is Jedd Fisch in taking over. Damon Williams in his 2 starts last year really showed the potential that he possesses. Next up, we go to the UCLA Bruins. How many more teams do we have here as we're trying to really roll through this? All right, we're going. Listen, this is going to be the longest one yet. Of course. This is going to be the longest Big Ten breakdown ever. I do apologize. We just got so much to break down, and I hope you enjoy through. You can also go through, find your team that you want to listen to most in this entire time. All right, next up, we go to the UCLA Bruins. To me, the term that defines 2025 for UCLA is one name. It's Nico Iamaleava, the transfer to UCLA in late April. 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions during his first full year as a starter in Knoxville for Tennessee. He was one of the main storylines of the offseason. He is one of the main storylines of this new era of NIL in college football and what that means. Nico Iamaleava now will try to bring that talent to the Rose Bowl, to Westwood. I'm skeptical. I watched a lot of Nico play last year for the Volunteers, and you see those numbers. 19 touchdowns to 5 interceptions for a guy who was making his first full season as a starter. Yeah, but 14 of those 19 touchdowns against Chattanooga, an NC State team that was not very great, a winless Kent State team in the opening half, UTEP, and then Vanderbilt. He had a great game against Vanderbilt. And Vandy was good last year in the SEC. But in the other 8 games for Nico Iamaleava during his time as Tennessee starter, just 5 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, averaging just 161 passing yards per game and a 59.6% completion percentage. In those other 8 games that we just highlighted there, he only threw for 200-plus yards once. He is going to be the engine that either makes UCLA a 6 or 7 win football team, or he can be decent and the Bruins can be around a 5-win team as they were a year ago. Tino Sunseri, who had been with Curt Cignetti during his time and last year, of course, in his lone year at Indiana, takes over as the offensive coordinator. And there was a time where UCLA was kind of a thorn in the side of many Big Ten foes last year. They won 3 of their last 5 Big Ten games, including then on top of that, I should say, additionally, their finale against Fresno State. They won outright as an underdog in those last 3 wins in Big Ten play. UCLA booked as a dog in 10 of 12 games last year. They were 6-4 against the number. I referenced the ATS trends because to me, when you are booked as an underdog, are you defying expectation? Are you keeping games closer and more competitive than we might expect or the odds makers do? That's a sign of a team that can continue to improve year over year when you have some of those close losses start to become close wins, especially if Nico Iamaleava is going to be that difference maker in Westwood. UCLA pretty good defensively last year, one of 4 Big Ten teams to allow fewer than 100 rushing yards per game. All right, we are now here with the I-80 Club. I have told you I got my start in my love with Big Ten football in Omaha, Nebraska, working as a sports reporter and anchor for the CBS affiliate KMTV 3 News now. Nebraska holds a very special place in my heart. I'm sure you have seen me interact with many Nebraska fans on the streets of New York City. I feel very fond things to the Cornhuskers football program. And I'm not exactly shy about some of those biases. So each and every year, I buy into the Husker hype train. I am drinking the Kool-Aid much like you. So how will we define Nebraska in the 2025 season? I've decided the phrase is this. Is it Andy Dufresne or is it Ellis Redding, otherwise known as Red? If you have seen Shawshank Redemption, one of the great films in cinema in the history of it, Andy Dufresne and Red, polar opposites in a way of how they define the word hope. During their long tenure at Shawshank, Red, played by Morgan Freeman, tells Andy Dufresne, quote, "Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane." If you've been following Nebraska the last 3 to 4 years, you probably resonate with that very idea. But Andy responds at the end after he escapes Shawshank. He gets down to Mexico. He plants the plan for Red to come join him there on the beaches of Mexico as well. He writes in a note to Red that he finds somewhere in Maine, if you remember, the quote being this, quote, "Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." So where does your hope lie for Nebraska in 2025? I am hopeful. I am optimistic. And how can you not be? But we have been spurned and we have been in this spot many an offseason past. The Cornhuskers have the biggest dynasty in all of Big Ten football, maybe in all of college football. I think it's 8 or 9 consecutive offseason national championships. I say wink, wink. But last year was a big step in kind of realizing some of that hope, maybe turning more from Red's version of hope to Andy Dufresne's, to finally get the monkey off the back, to earn a bowl game berth for the first time since 2016, and not just seeing bowl eligibility, but winning a bowl game for the first time since 2015. If you are watching in the great state of Nebraska, you know this. If you are listening there as well, you know this better than most. Year 3 Matt Rhule is one of the reasons you can be hopeful entering 2025 for the Huskers as well. In his first college football tenure as a head coach at Temple, in year 1, they won 2 games. In year 2, they reached bowl eligibility, at least posting 6 wins. In year 3, 10 wins. It was the first time since 1979 the Temple Owls had won 10 games. Then at Baylor, resurrecting that program that Art Briles left in absolute mayhem and in scandal. First year for Matt Rhule in Waco, 1 win. Second year, 7 wins. Third year, 11 wins, and a berth in the Big 12 championship game. So will year 3 Matt Rhule follow a similar trajectory this year at Nebraska? 5 wins in 2023, 7 including the bowl victory in 2024. And could 2025 be double-digit wins once again? And I will repeat this often. If you are a team in the Big 10 and the SEC, namely the Big 2 in the Power 4, and you are a 10-win football team, you have a wonderful opportunity to earn a college football playoff spot. Could that be what Nebraska realizes this year? Well, now let's get down to the roster. Dylan Raiola, 13 touchdowns to 11 INTs last year as that true freshman starter in Lincoln with a ton of the hype. 8 of those TDs coming in the first 4 games, only 3. But then 3 of his next 5 touchdowns that he produced came with Dana Holgorsen as the new offensive coordinator. And now they have a full offseason together. And Dana Holgorsen, one of the best offensive coaches that you will find in this sport, and doing it for a very long time. Love the offensive line, love the transfers, and Elijah Pritchett from Alabama, Rocco Spindler coming over from Notre Dame, Henry Letowski still there as well, and Teddy Prohaska. If he can stay healthy, you have a really good offensive line that I believe could be the best, if not one of the best, in the Big Ten Conference this year. We'll see what John Butler does as the defensive coordinator. Of course, you guys, if you are a fan of the I-80 Club, have been getting all the Nebraska storylines throughout this offseason from Josh and Jack here for all the great work they have done. But my one phrase that will define Nebraska in 2025, Andy Dufresne or Red, is hope a dangerous thing or is hope the best of all things and no good thing ever dies? I lean more Andy Dufresne skewed for Nebraska in the 2025 college football season. Next up, we go to the Michigan State Spartans. What is that one word for year number 2 under Jonathan Smith in East Lansing? I would say progress, because the first year under Jonathan Smith had some ups and downs and a 5-7 record. Only 14 wins in total the last 3 years for this Spartans football program. That is not the standard in East Lansing, but maybe I believe in Jonathan Smith more than most, because how he resurrected Oregon State to leave his alma mater was difficult, but where he left it despite conference realignment for Oregon State from a winning perspective, was incredibly successful. In 2021, he led Oregon State to their first winning record since 2013. In 2022, he led the Beavs to their first 10-win season since 2006, but he did arrive in Corvallis as the head coach in 2018, 2 full seasons, and then had to realize that winning record in 2021 and taking a step in 2022. Are they still a year away in East Lansing? Perhaps. But if you follow me on Twitter, if you follow me on X, whatever you want to call it, you know that I am rather high on this Michigan State team. And I tweeted out earlier this week that I believe Aiden Childs has an opportunity to lead the Big Ten Conference in passing yards in 2025. That might sound crazy, but I think with an improved O-line and a wide receiver core that is slightly undervalued, and Jonathan Smith's ability to get his best from quarterbacks, Aiden Childs has an opportunity to be one of the best in the Big Ten in 2025. Does that mean Michigan State's winning 8 or 9 games? No, their win total's 5.5. I do think they see bowl eligibility in 2025, but I think Aiden Childs has a great opportunity. And a name to know, of course, in that wide receiver room is Nick Marsh. Set freshman records in East Lansing last year for MSU in receiving yards, 649, and total receptions. The first ever true freshman in his debut season to have multiple 100-plus yard receiving games for Michigan State a season ago. I think Michigan State gets to bowl eligibility this year, and that is what I consider their one key word for this season that defines 2025. That would be progress for MSU. All right, 4 more Big Ten schools to preview here in our 2025 preview. I understand it has been lengthy. Thank you for bearing with me. I hope you're still having fun. The Wisconsin Badgers are next up. What is my one phrase for Wisconsin? Don't judge a book by its cover. It's the old adage we all know, and your grandmother or a family member, a relative, a school teacher has probably mentioned that to you a time or two. Why do I say that for Wisconsin? Last year, 5-7. First losing record in Madison since 2001, snapping a 22 consecutive year bowl streak. It was the 3rd longest in the country. There was reason, I think, to be a little bit pessimistic around Luke Fickell building this program for all of his incredible success at Cincinnati. Could he replicate it now for the Badgers? I understand the pessimism, but here's why I say don't judge a book by its cover, because I don't think Wisconsin gets the 9 wins. Heck, if Wisconsin reaches bowl eligibility, to me, that is success, but I know that is not the standard in Madison, thus not judging a book by its cover. Wisconsin has by far the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. Again, by those preseason and projected win totals, their average of 7.83 of all FBS opponents, and the Badgers play 12. They're one of 10 schools that only plays FBS foes in 2025. It is the 2nd hardest in the country. My alma mater, Syracuse, has the only harder one, but it's not just average. Wisconsin is the only team in the country to play 4 teams, including a non-conference road game in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, that have a win total of 9.5. Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, 3 of those 4 games against the Tide, Wolverines, and Ducks come on the road as well. It is a grueling gauntlet for the Badgers this year. So when I say don't judge a book by its cover, what can that look like? Can Wisconsin keep games close against this incredibly stout schedule? Will that be enough to satiate enough of success? Well, Wisconsin fans, and I understand if your answer to this is no, shut up, nerd. You don't know what you're talking about, Big Ten Ben. If your answer is, hey, if we go 5-7, send that guy out to Lake Madison. Get him out of here. We don't need him anymore leading this football program. I completely understand it. But I think if Wisconsin is competitive, often probably booked as an underdog this year, which has not been the case for Badgers football the last 2.5 decades, and they are keeping games close against the best competition, not just in this league in the Big Ten, but in the country in college football, maybe Luke Fickell is showing you that he has signs of life. That could be the case this year for the Badgers. To not judge a book by its cover, we'll see the new partnership of new offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes with new quarterback and Billy Edwards Jr., who was 2nd in the conference last year at Maryland, averaging nearly 262 yards per game. 2nd in the conference in passing yards per game on average. From Wisconsin, we go to Northwestern. What is the one word to define the Cats this year? Pesky. In year number 1 under David Braun, of course, entering an impossible situation. Maybe you saw the headlines late this week that Pat Fitzgerald has settled his lawsuit against Northwestern, basically finding that he was not aware of any of the hazing taking place. Nobody ever went to him were issues of hazing. That settlement has now been resolved between Fitzgerald and Northwestern, but it was David Braun that was hired in 2023 as Fitz's DC that had to take over as the head coach. And what did he do as his first year on the shores of Lake Michigan? Only win 8 games. The most for a Northwestern head coach in his first year since 1903. More than a century plus, 120 years to be exact. They had 5 Big Ten wins in 2023 in Braun's debut season, the most ever for a first-year head coach in Northwestern football history. But last year, a little bit back down to earth. 4-8 straight up, only 2 Big Ten wins. They were a dog in every Big Ten game. And again, when you are booked as an underdog consistently, if you're covering games, you're defying those expectations, you're a better football team. Just 3-6 against the spread for Northwestern a year ago. But the reason I say pesky is because I think Northwestern will be booked as a dog often. So can they keep games close? Can they pull off a couple of outright upsets? I think that will be trusted to Preston Stone, the SMU transfer who takes over now at the quarterback spot. And quarterback issues were paramount for Northwestern a season ago. At SMU, Preston Stone was the starter in 2023 when the Stangs won the American. Last year started the year as the starter, opening up the year, starting the first 4 games, and then was replaced by Kevin Jennings for a team, of course, that reached the ACC championship game and got to the college football playoff. But when you go back to 2023 and the 12 starts that he made, Preston Stone nearly 3,200 passing yards, 28 passing touchdowns, and plenty of new transfers along with Stone projected in that starting rotation in the depth chart for the 11 on the offensive side. That will be something to see. Zach Lujan is that offensive coordinator. Came over from South Dakota State, understood David Braun, understood what he was getting into at Northwestern, a creative mind. We'll see how that looks now for Northwestern in 2025. It's a difficult schedule for the Cats, as you might expect. Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Illinois, all on the schedule, and a really intriguing non-conference game around a touchdown underdog in New Orleans against Tulane. That game is going to show us just how pesky, the term to define Northwestern in 2025, how those Wildcats can perform this upcoming season. 2 more teams to go. Let's get through it. The Maryland Terrapins. What is the term to define the Terps in 2025? A tale of 2 years. I found it often refreshing what Mike Locksley did at Big Ten Media Days at the end of July, basically admitting and saying, I lost the locker room. I lost our locker room a season ago. So now what does Locksley do to get that back in 2025? Maryland went 4-8 a season ago. Just 1 Big Ten win. It was the first time they did not win at least 7 games in a full season since 2019. That was Locksley's first year. His 7th year now as the head coach at Maryland. And when I say a tale of 2 years, that is often for Maryland, not first half of the year or second half or this or that. It is non-conference versus Big Ten play. Maryland in non-conference action under Mike Locksley is 17-1 straight up. It is the second best record among FBS college football against non-conference foes since 2019, only behind Georgia. But the record for the Terrapins in Big Ten play under Locksley is 15-35. It is the second worst record for a conference member in the Big Ten. Only Rutgers with a worse record in that span, but not necessarily in the Schiano tenure of this time. Certainly not the last few years. 2 new coordinators to make sure you know this year in College Park. Pep Hamilton, maybe a name you know, longtime NFL assistant, takes over as the offensive coordinator. Ted Monachino takes over as the defensive coordinator. More than a decade of NFL experience as well. Spent last year as the defensive line coach with North Carolina. Only 42% returning production for Maryland. We'll talk about 42% returning production for our final Big Ten team, over 18 in the conference in just a little bit with Purdue. But that's the second lowest among Power 4 teams in all of college football. Purdue just a little bit behind Maryland. So when you don't have a ton of familiar faces, you have to have some talent and excitement to sell the fan base. That's Malik Washington, who is projected as the starting quarterback for the Terps in 2025. 4-star recruit, 10th best quarterback in the 2025 class. A lot of expectation to take over as a true freshman and start from day number 1. Highest quarterback recruit for Maryland since 2006. This is what Mike Locksley does. He recruits incredibly well. He wins non-conference games. Can he start to win those Big Ten affairs? That will be the story, a tale of 2 years for the Terps. If not, I wonder how hot that seat gets in College Park. Zion Ely, the second-ranked recruit in the country the edge rusher in 2026, committed to Maryland. How does that future beyond 2025 start to pan out if Maryland is struggling in Big Ten play once again? Deep breath. Our 18th and final Big Ten season preview, defined by one word. We go to the Purdue Boilermakers to round things out. What is the term for the Boilers? November 4th. You might be thinking, what game is that? No, it's a Tuesday. That is the start of the Purdue Boilermakers men's basketball season. I say that almost tongue-in-cheek. I would tell you all right now, bet Purdue to win the national championship next year. Believe me, they are going to be a Final Four team. But that's really where some of the excitement comes for the Boilers. Fans in West Lafayette this year, basketball season is going to be incredible. But with those high heights, maybe football is a little bit disappointing. It's going to be difficult for Purdue to win a ton of games this year. Truthfully, that's how I feel. Because last year, of course, they won a single game, and they were winless against FBS competition. Now enter Barry Odom. I love this hire for the Boilermakers. I really do. In his 2 years at UNLV, he had 2 winning seasons at Missouri as a head coach in 4 total. In his 2 years at UNLV, he led the Runnin' Rebs to back-to-back 9-win years, the first time in a program history of nearly a half-century and 47 years of UNLV football there in Sin City. And when you look at what he did as well, 2 straight Mountain West title game appearances for UNLV, 11 wins total in 2024. I think Barry Odom is a sensational hire for Purdue, but there is so much to fix and figure out this year in West Lafayette. I mentioned 42% returning production. It is the fewest for the Boilermakers, just by a little bit in terms of a power conference program. 1-11 a year ago. Not a single win against an FBS foe. And when they were booked as in those 11 games, against FBS competition, 2-9 against the spread. That's where Purdue was even faltering based on what was pretty low expectation. Now, in that Hoosier state, you might be thinking of Indiana. Curt Cignetti came into IU, reinvented that program from the very start, brought a ton of JMU transfers. Did Barry Odom do the same, leaving Las Vegas with a team that won 11 games a season ago? Only 7 guys making the move. Not quite that exodus from James Madison to Indiana under Curt Cignetti. So again, November 4th is the term. That's when Purdue's basketball season starts. And I think it's going to be a national championship winning season in West Lafayette. But we'll talk basketball a little bit later on Big Ten Breakdown. So the sign of life for Purdue this year is how competitive do these games look? Can they not be a doormat? Can they have a moment or two, an upset or two that will define this season for Purdue football? That would be a resounding sign of success for Barry Odom in his first year as the head coach in West Lafayette. All right. A very long episode. I promise you, you have my word. It will never be this long again on Big Ten Breakdown, but for our first rendition, for our first ever episode, and for a full preview of 18 schools in the Big Ten Conference getting you ready for 2025, I hope that you enjoyed. Again, skip around, find some schools. We spent about 5-7 minutes on every school here, and a reminder of what you can expect on Big Ten Breakdown. Twice a week, pre-game preview show dropping each and every Friday morning that will preview the entire weekend slate around the Big Ten, non-conference, and as we get into the conference schedule as well, and a recap post-game show that we will have as well for you each and every Monday morning. The biggest moments and the biggest storylines from the weekend, and we'll have some fun along the way. Thank you for joining me on this new venture. We're going to have a ton of fun. I can promise you that. I'm so excited once again and ecstatic to be a part of the I-80 Club. We are going to be having a great time. Maybe some Wi-Fi issue right there, so that might have been cut off, but that's all right. Again, I'm so happy to be here as a part of the I-80 Club. We're having some Wi-Fi issues. Come on, get back to us here. One final thing. Doesn't look like we're going to get it. I'm wearing my Big Ten hat, though. There it is. All right, we're back. Not sure why we're having Wi-Fi issues. Don't forget, Big Ten Breakdown, twice a week, right here on the I-80 Club. You can get it for free wherever you get your podcasts. We're always on the YouTube channel. If you want all of this without ads, patreon.com/I-80 Club. Thanks for joining me on this venture. We're going to have a ton of fun.